can have excuses. Nice, isn't it? Wasn't me. It was him over there. I just excuse myself. No, that's not the way of growing. To own oneself as to having done something wrong is to admit, done it wrong. Then we can learn. Excuses. How can you learn from excuses? You can't. The key to salvation is not in man, but in God and an act of God. That's where it lies, in justification, by an act of God, on the road to Damascus. And with Abraham in the wilderness, who preached the gospel to the Abraham in the wilderness? Because the gospel was preached to him. Who? God. Because the gospel was already in Abraham. It was already there. It had already been preached. God just revived the law. The gospel is the law. Revived it, and Abraham died, spiritually died to self, and lived unto God. The gospel. For a long time now, for too many years, too many ages, people have been listening to the gospel of Arminianism. The gospel of man, rather than the gospel of God. Now the gospel, we should all know this. In chapter 14, 6 and 7 of the book of the Revelation, we have the gospel. And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven. The midst of heaven. He wasn't on earth. Wasn't in heaven or on earth, but in the midst. In the midst is the conscience. We've gone over this before. But it's worthwhile to keep on concerning this, because Arminianism does not cease to preach its godless message. Its unlawful, godless message. And lawless, we say. And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel, to preach unto them that dwell on the earth. Now it was preached to Adam. And within Adam contained the entire world of mankind. So in one man it was preached. Preached to him meant preaching to the entire human race which was contained within him. Of all the people that should dwell upon the earth. And to every nation and tongue and kindred and tongue and people that should come out of him and have come out of him. And as a result, every person, every human being in this human race, in this world, knows right from wrong, which is the law of God, right and wrong. Everybody knows it. It's in their consciences. And what is it? Also in the consciences? You tell me where this comes from. It's in your conscience when you were a child. If it's out of your conscience now, what have you done with it? Saying with a loud voice, fear God. We know that as kids, as children, little children, fear God. And give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come. That's referring to the hour of his judgment in the judgment of Adam and this world when Adam disobeyed God. And worship him that made heaven and earth and the sea and the fountain of the waters. That's the gospel. And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to everlasting life. It's filial fear that every child, every one of us was born with. So we had the gospel. Abraham had the gospel. preached to him. Even Paul says to the Galatians, he had the gospel first preached to him. In other words, it was brought alive and he died. And so did Saul of Tarsus to become Paul the Apostle. So you Arminians and you Arminian neo-evangelicals, when you're trying to figure out why a certain person out of a jungle has never heard the gospel, you're all wrong. You're all wrong. You have no understanding of what the gospel is of the scriptures. And so many people stand up in pulpits and say, I don't understand how such and such, having not heard the gospel, is saved. Just beggars belief, doesn't it? Beggars belief. We've got people like that. And they're running after pulpits. They want to be seen. It's a world now that everybody wants to be seen, to be noticed. What is wrong with the world that has become so iniquitous that people want to be noticed? The key to their lives is themselves. It's absolutely abominable. But we're living in the few days that are left. When we say a few days, maybe 20 years. The rate we're going, it's doubtful even if we get to that. And he has the keys to the salvation of the soul. Yes, again, Mr. Arminian. The keys to the salvation of the soul. The new man, the old man, and the old man is the flesh. The new man is within. Arminianism, Romanism, Anglicanism, etc., 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 etc. is purely secular. They do not believe in dualism, both soul and body. They only believe in the body, and that the body can commit to their Christ, says Arminianism, and be saved. No, it cannot be saved. The body cannot be saved. It's only the soul that can be saved. The body is to be transformed and renewed upon our passing from this world to the next. It is the soul. Yes, the soul, the invisible part, the part that cannot commit to the Socinian Christ of Arminianism. All you can make by your commitments is nominal Christians, foolish virgins, dogs and goats and all the rest of the wild animals. You can't make sheep. You can only make old goats. Christ was the only one that could put the key, and he was the key to life eternal, to put it in to the prison house of the bondage to sin, and to unlock the doors at Calvary, as it were, well, in fact, beyond that, because they were unlocked in eternity. He simply made them sealed up, as it were, openly sealed up, opened. As it stands in eternity, the Lamb's Book of Life, we were there as free men. Opposite was the Book of Works for the world. When we came into this world, we fell in Adam. and we were locked in the prison house of bondage to sin. Now, in reflection of that, we are the eternal sons, children, people of God, the bride of Christ. The doors were open, but we were still chained. We were still chained and bound, and the doors were, try work this one, closed and yet open. And yet open. But it wasn't so for those in the book of works. Theirs was permanently shut. So in this world, although we're enclosed in the prison house of sin when we're born in sin and shapen in iniquity, the doors were effectively also open because of our salvation. Yet we didn't realise it. We couldn't realise it. We couldn't even realise we were the children of God. We had not a clue. But in time God would show us that we are the children of God through salvation. And what happened at Calvary, one of the aspects, one of the keys of Calvary, was that the doors were sealed open. Salvation was sealed up. Sealed up. And there is no way back into the prison house of bondage to sin. Not for us. There's no falling from grace. You see, it began in the beginning, in the Lamb's Book of Life, that we had life eternal, in an eternal realm, and that could not be taken away because it was performed in eternity. And so time could not affect anything about our salvation. We can only realise our salvation in time. And that's the whole point of us being here, in the sense that we are here as Christ came as a forerunner to obtain a glorified body. For a new heaven that we shall enter once we leave this world. A corporeal heaven. Oh yes, a corporeal heaven. Christ could stand there and eat corporeal food. Beyond that, we live through a glass darkly. There's none of this thing that it's going to be not a solid heaven. It's solid. It's solid. If it wasn't, there'd be no need of this world. This world was only created for us. For Christ and for us. To obtain glorified bodies. Now Jesus Christ has the keys to eternal life. No man has the keys to eternal life but Jesus Christ. And those he releases in eternity, displayed in time, shall be with him for all eternity. He was the first surety to the first phase of the church in the former testament. He was the surety. He is now the captain of our salvation. You see the difference. He's never spoken of. Jesus Christ is never spoken of. Our elder brother in the former testament as the captain of salvation. Because he did not ride forth, go forth on his charger of purity, with the holy angels of heaven against the forces of darkness until Calvary. Then he became the captain of salvation. Then was he seen as the captain of the armies of heaven that arrayed themselves against the armies of hell, of darkness that surrounded Calvary. And then did the battle of Armageddon take place. Then the captain of salvation bent his bow. Then the captain of salvation chased the enemy from the field of battle, threw right into hell, into the city and cities of destruction, which we read of in Joel. And he captured those in bondage to sin, and he made an open display of them before heaven and before hell itself. He led captivity captive. That's what he did. And oh, how the enemy doesn't like that. Paul says to the Ephesians in chapter 4, that there is one God and Father of us all, verse 6, who is above all and through all and in you all. Oops, Arminianism, bye-bye. For God is the Father of all. Hey, he's the Father of mankind, and in particular, he's the Father of us, our Holy Father. Right? Who is above all and through all and in you all. But unto every one of us is given grace according to the measure of the gift of Christ. Wherefore he saith, verse 8, when he ascended up on high, he led captivity captive, and gave gifts unto men. Verse 9, now he that ascended, what is it but that he also descended first into the lower parts of the earth? Christ in the hypostatic union, according to Paul, and according to heaven, descended and took on the enemy and led captivity captive. Led captivity captive. Sealed up our salvation. Salvation is always retrospective for those who are the elect of God. And no matter how much theatrical performances are put on by neo-evangelical Arminians, they cannot alter what is. What is, is. One of the things you see that, two of the things that Arminian gospel campaigns do, specifically, purposely do. One is to mock Christ. When Christ says he won every soul that belonged to God, when he won them all back to God, the great gospel campaign movement says, no, you didn't. You're a blackguard, you're a liar, you're sinful. Because we are making and winning souls to Christ. What a contradiction. What an awful, a mayhem is that. We're winning them for Christ. Which Christ is this? Whilst they're mocking Christ. They're using the name of Christ to mock Christ. To say they're winning souls to Christ. because Christ couldn't win them. What depth of wickedness is that these beggars stand up and actually say they're winning souls for Christ because Christ couldn't win one soul. He couldn't even win his own family that he'd lived with for years on end. Right? His family didn't believe in him. That is, his brothers and his sisters, James and Joseph and Jude and Simeon, they didn't believe. So Christ, in Arminian terms, is a failure. And therefore they have to go out and they say, oh yeah, he's a failure. So we're going to win souls to Christ because Christ is a failure. And every which way, they're mocking Christ. Now, of course, justification by faith doesn't even enter into Arminianism. Their key to salvation is commitment. And why should justification by faith be with Arminianism? Why should it? Because they're from Rome. It's works for them. Commitment is a work. It's the first work of their salvation. And then you follow the law. That's Romanism. No wonder they hated Arminianism prior to the Billy Grahams of this world and the Moody's of this world, who twisted